Thank you so much, Ona. Merci un peu. I'm so happy, nervous, and thrilled to be up here with our esteemed guest, Dr. Leslie Alexander. Thank you, Dr. Surratt. Thank you, HSI. Thank you, President Sandra Dudionné Alani, for bringing us Dr. Leslie Alexander. I had the pleasure and honor of being asked to moderate, to be in conversation with everybody. I read the book and I have 20 pages of notes, but I'm so glad Dr. Surratt said, this is going to be a conversation, so I'm going to try and be good about it. So my role will be, I will read Dr. Alexander's bio, and then we're going to sit here. I'll ask her some questions for about 15 minutes or so, and then it's a big Q&A back and forth. Okay, some of you have copies of the book, so we'll take it from there as much as conversation as possible. So it's not just we're up here and then you. So it's going to be you with us, all of us together. So Dr. Leslie Alexander. Dr. Leslie Alexander is the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Professor of History at Rutgers University and a fellow at the Carr Center for Human Rights Policy at Harvard University. A specialist in African American and African diaspora history, she is the author of African or American, Black Identity and the Political Activism in New York City, 1784 to 1861. And of course, she's also the author of the book that we're going to be in conversation today, Fear of a Black Republic, Haiti and the Birth of Black Internationalism in the United States, and 3 co-edited volumes. Her current research examines how surveillance of free and enslaved Black communities during the colonial and antebellum eras laid the foundation for modern-day policing. A 3-time Ford Foundation Fellowship recipient, Dr. Alexander is a past president of the Association for the Study of the Worldwide African Diaspora, ASWAD, and serves on the advisory councils for the Journal of African American History, Black Perspective, Global Black Thought, and the Montpellier Foundation. So, Dr. Alexander. These are my notes.
That is a lot of pages of notes.
So, the first thing I thought that we could delve into is what led you to write this book? And then we're going to talk about, in summary, what's in the book. So what led you to write this amazing book? President Dieudonné had talked about how someone who is not of Haitian descent having a lot of love for Haiti, and that's exactly what came across in this book. Somebody who's not just reporting, saying words, but somebody who's taking care and diligence. I think in your introduction, I think it was your mentor who said there's a way that historians can approach history with love and care and diligence. And I want to add passion. And I also see a lot of passion in this book, which resembles a lot of the passion that Black activists in the 1800s had for Haiti. Dr. Alexander was a direct descendant of those Black activists in this time. So can you talk about what led you to write about this book?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first I just would like to, say evening and thank you so much for inviting me. It is just like such an extraordinary honor to be invited to be in community with you all and to be here tonight. As we were planning this, you all kept sending me emails saying, thank you so much, thank you. And I just kept feeling like, no, thank you. Like, it's an extraordinary honor to be included, to be in conversation with you all. So just thank you so much for having me and welcoming me into the space. The truth is, I get asked this question a lot, and there's two reasons that I usually give for why I wrote this book, but since, we're family here, I'll also tell you one other reason that I don't normally tell in public settings is actually one of the things that really kind of pushed me over the edge to write the book. So, the first thing, was just sort of a basic intellectual curiosity. I am a historian, but and hopefully, this is a little bit of the energy that you're picking up. I'm also a Black Studies scholar. I use history as my disciplinary lens, but I really came through Black Studies. And that makes a huge difference for me, right? Because for people who are familiar, with the legacy of the Black Studies movement in this country, you'll know that Black Studies was really founded as what I often describe as the intellectual wing of a movement, of the Black liberation struggle. And so from the very beginning, I always have approached everything that I've read and studied and taught and written about from the idea that the purpose of doing this is not just about idle curiosity, right? But it is about Black liberation. It's about the liberation of people of African descent, that's the goal and that's the purpose of the work that we're doing. So as a result of that study, I obviously along the way learned and heard a lot about the Haitian Revolution. But the truth is like in a lot of that education, the Haitian Revolution was taught as largely kind of disconnected, right, from the experience of African descended people in the other parts of the world. It was like the Haitian Revolution was this amazing thing, and then we just sort of went back right to studying other things. And when I was writing the first book, which you mentioned, which was about Black political consciousness in New York City in the 19th century, I became really fascinated with the migration of Black activists during the 19th century and just regular everyday Black folk, right? During the 19th century from the US to Haiti. And of course, a large number of them came from New York, but they were also coming from Boston, they were coming from Philadelphia, they were coming from Baltimore, they were coming from Washington, D.C. Some of them were even escaping bondage and fleeing to Haiti, right? And so I just became really interested in this question of like, what is it that Haiti represents to them? Like, why is Haiti a place they want to go? Especially because so much of that story of those immigration movement focused on Black folks going to Canada, right, for kind of logical, just kind of reasons of efficiency, right, that Canada is so closely located. And then, of course, there was lots of study about Black people who were wanting to repatriate, right, wanting to go back to the motherland and wanting to go back to West Africa. Liberia, right, Liberia, Sierra Leone, right, in later times, Nigeria. But there wasn't very much discussion about people migrating to Haiti, and there was almost no discussion about why Haiti is a place they want to go. And so it was just something that kind of kept nagging in the back of my head, but I was under pressure to finish the book and, so I just kind of, filed it away as something that I wanted to understand more as time went on. The story that I very rarely tell, that kind of
do tell,
yeah, everybody's like, what? I went to a conference. I'm trying to keep it like very vague so no one can like go back and figure this out. But I went to a conference shortly after I had finished my first book. And there was like a big at academic conferences, we have these like what they call these like big plenary sessions where like, everybody from the conference comes and it's a panel and all these fancy people are speaking. And one of the people on the panel started giving a talk about the problem with Black activists in the United States in the 19th century. And of course, as soon as he started with that, I was like, okay, here we go. Like, what's what's people now? Right. But his argument was that part of the problem with Black people in the 19th century in the United States was that they only cared about their own freedom. They only cared about their own liberation struggle. And not only did they not care, but they knew nothing about the liberation struggles that were happening in other parts of the Americas. Now, as it turned out, I had just finished writing a book, right, about Black political consciousness during that same time period. And almost all of the first Black newspapers that were published in the 19th century were published out of New York City. So I had read every single one of these papers from cover to cover. And I knew just from having glanced, right, at these newspapers that they were talking about these places around the world, right? They're talking about what's happening in Jamaica. They're talking about what's happening in Barbados. They're talking about what's happening in Bermuda. And of course, they're talking about what's happening in Haiti. And so what bothered me in that moment was that no one objected. Like, there was me and one other, like, Black scholar who was sitting, who I've always wished like I knew who he was so I could go back and be like, do you remember that crazy, because at the time, and when, as soon as the guy said it, his head kind of went up and we like locked eyes and we were both like, what is happening in here? But like everybody else was just like, yeah, like started taking notes like, yes, that's the problem, right? With Black activists in the US in the 19th century. And it just went totally unquestioned. From the question and answer period, he and I both like, sort of had a go at him. But what bothered me was how quickly and universally that idea was accepted, right? That Black people only cared about their own local struggles and they didn't care about what was happening in the rest of the world. And I knew just from having looked at those newspapers, I hadn't even looked at anything else on that topic. I knew that there was a trove, right, of information that would combat that. And the fact that it was so readily accepted made me realize, like, we have to write something about, somebody, right, has to write something about this. I think for me, I'll be completely honest about this. I am not of Haitian descent, as far as I know. I mean, obviously, that's right. Things about being a person of African descent in this country, right? Like, I actually know where we're from, right? But as far as I know, I'm just, a regular U.S. Negro, and so I felt really, I was trained in U.S. African American history. And so I felt really like I knew how important this topic was. I knew how important this history was. I knew how important it was to get it right. And I felt really intimidated and felt like maybe I'm not the person, who should write this book. And so I honestly just sat on the topic for a long time, like knowing I wanted to write about it, but feeling like I probably shouldn't be the one to do it.
What convinced you?
The 2010. So the thing that really pushed me over the edge was, obviously the earthquake was devastating for so many reasons, but as a historian and as someone who lived in the United States, the thing that really pushed me over the edge and made me feel like somebody has to write something is the media coverage, right? That like the way I've described it a couple times before is that like we heard was Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere over and over and over again. The way I've described it before is like we heard it repeated ad nauseum until it started to sound more like a chant of accusation than a statement of fact. And what really bothered me about it was it was just devoid of any kind of discussion, right? The country doesn't become the poorest country in its hemisphere for no reason, right? Like that's not an accident. That's by design, right? And the lack of historical context for that, right? Like the utter unwillingness to come to terms with that. I literally like could not stomach it, right? As a historian, but also just as a human.
Mm-hmm.
And it still took me a while, right, to kind of pluck up my courage to be like, okay, like maybe this is a story that I can tell. And I think in the end, what I decided I was going to write and what I hoped the book would ultimately do is certainly that, right? Like give people some understanding, right, of the role that the United States played, right, in what has happened, right, over the past 220 years. But I also kind of was hoping to send like a call to action, to other Black people born and raised in this country, who, as far as they know, like me, right, are just regular U.S. Negroes, um, to remind them that there actually was a time, right, when Black people in this country cared as much about Haiti and about Haiti's fate as they did their own. And
because they were tied together. And I think that's something the book gets at. They were tied together. It's not just you over here doing this and we over here doing this. What you do here makes sense for us here. And that's what your book gets at.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, right? Is that they understood how deeply entwined their fates were, right? And they recognized that they didn't speak the same language, that they didn't worship the same gods, right? That they were different, right, in some significant ways, but they understood each other as children of Africa, right, as descendants of Africa and as survivors of enslavement, right? And that was all that was required, right? Bond them to each other. Oh, okay. And to be committed, right, to each other's liberation. And so I was and am, right, hopeful that Black people in this country who maybe don't know that much about Haiti, right, will feel a call to action in this story, right? Recognize that Haiti was and is central to the story of the global Black liberation struggle, and that we should care. I'll just say this really quickly because I know we want to get into the book, but it's interesting because I have discovered just over the past like maybe 6 months or so, because literally every time I talk about this book, people are like, why are you interested? Like, why did you write this book? And I've started to realize that what is underlying that question often is, you are not Haitian. You are not Haitian American. Why do you care? And that bothers me. Again, like as someone who is grounded in the Black studies tradition, I feel like, why wouldn't I care? Right? Like, if there is one example in the history of African peoples in the Americas that represents, right, what the potential of victory looks like, it's Haiti. Like, why wouldn't I care? But I think that, and I'm sure we'll get into this is part of it, right? If we look at the 19th century, we see that Black people then got that in the United States, right? They understood, and they were crystal clear about it. But over time, we see the unmaking of that, right? Like the propaganda campaign that is waged in this country to try to make Black people feel ashamed of Haiti, right? To frame Haiti as a failed nation, right? To do all those things to inspire Black people in this country to distance themselves from Haiti. So I think in a way it's sad, right? It shows that we've actually gone backwards in that way. Because if no one would have asked me that question in the 19th century, they would have been like, of course you care about Haiti.
It would have been like immigration or recognition. That would have been
that would have been the conversation, right? That literally would have been the conversation, but it wouldn't have been like, why do you care about Haiti? What do you know? It's like, everybody cares. Like, who doesn't care about Haiti, right? But here we are in the 21st century, and here we are.
There's something about the of course, we mentioned this about the silencing of the past and all that. At one point, Haiti is very visible, hyper visible.
Yes.
To be poor, to be Black, and a whole list of things. And it's invisible, but it does great things. And I think one thing that the Black activist has done is bring that sort of contextualization. Because every time from 1804 up until, well, the book we'll get into, like the structure of the book, from 1804 up until the Civil War in the 1860s, 80s was up and down, but Black activists never gave up on it.
Never
They
gave
kind of
up.
like maybe slowed down. We don't know what's going to happen, but they always came with contextualization.
Yeah.
And they always like, it's you, US, you racist, US doing this. It's you. They never let up.
Yeah.
So I think what was missing is that was the context that they brought in relentlessly.
Yes.
You know, bringing it up, that giving it the context that was needed.
Yeah.
So every time whether it's the U.S. or France, did something, and we talk about the slave power,
Right.
which was the Southern Bloc, I think people might be familiar with this because every time there was some kind of resolution for recognition, the slave power, the very dominant voting power in the South, blocked it. Does that sound familiar? So Black people were always there, even though it ebbed and it flowed.
Yeah.
So, but also this notion of you talked about the centrality of radicalism that existed in that time period. Can you talk a little bit about that? What was the radicalism that you saw? We understand from the Haitian perspective, how dare you become, free of your of yourselves and be Black. But from the perspective of the Black activists, what were they looking at as the radical centrality of what they were doing, the radicality of it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I think what was so powerful, I think, in their minds. And it's part of the reason why I decided obviously I talk about the Haitian Revolution in the introduction, but it's part of the reason why I wanted the bulk of the book to start after 1804, is because what Haiti did was win, right? Like, it's the winning, right? That ultimately is what matters, right? That Black people in the United States and elsewhere around the Americas heard all the time about rebellions that had taken place, right? About revolts. So it's not, and the truth is, on the United States side, when what becomes the Haitian Revolution first pops off, it's kind of flying under the radar. People are like, oh, that's messy over there, right? There's another revolt happening. But it's like, revolts are happening across the Americas all the time, right? And it isn't until it becomes clear that it is unstoppable.
And you could win it.
Right, exactly. So it's actually, and then France is getting their butts kicked and everybody, you know what I mean? And they realize like, oh, it's on, right? Like, now it's a different conversation, right? But so to me, what makes Haiti different, and the reason why it inspires such radicalism, is because the Haitians win. And not only do they win, but they have the audacity, right? And I mean audacious in the best possible interpretation of the word, right? In that sense, to say, first of all, never, ever, ever, ever in the history of ever again are we going back to slavery, right? Like, we're never. But they also say we have the ability and the right to govern ourselves, and we intend to be sovereign, and we intend to remain sovereign. And you and I were joking about this a little bit, but to the point where they're like, we actually don't care whether anybody else recognizes us. Like, we are aware of our own sovereignty, right? And your recognition of that is not required.
And was doing very well, because they were still trade. One thing I was telling Dr. Alexander is that I didn't recognize is that when Haiti won its independence in 1804, United States tried to say, oh, we're not going to trade with you. But then it had to, because not only was everybody else doing it, but even though the United States said, okay, we'll trade with you again, but we're not going to recognize you as a nation. So at the same time we're trading, you're still less than us. So to me, that was a very nuanced way that I was like, I didn't know that was the case.
Yes. Well, right. And again, that's like one of those facts nobody wants anyone to know, right? But yes, the United States tries to impose an economic boycott, right, against Haiti in like 1806. It can't even last 4 years. They can't even hold out that long. Why? Because over the course of the entire 19th century, Haiti remains the United States' one of the United States' most important trade partners.
Most lucrative.
It usually ranged anywhere between its third most important trade partner and its fifth most important trade partner. But one of my favorite things, and I think it's in chapter 2, is these newspaper articles that went out with this like insanely long list, you know, of all of these other European nations, including like Spain and Portugal and whatever. And they, you know, they're making the point saying, you take the United States' trade relationship with all of these other countries combined, and it is still not as important as their trade relationship with Haiti. Right. So, yeah. Right. So that makes it, right. It makes it a really complicated story.
And also, from the readings of the reactions of the slavery, the 1804 independence, not only were they like shocked by it, but they recognized how great it was. It was all of this stupendous slave rebellion, this great, we cannot deal with this great, they were calling it these kind of big words. So they recognized how big it was. It wasn't like this little thing over there. It was like, this is huge and great, but we're not standing for it.
Right. No, they definitely knew, right? The size and the volume. And in this case, I'm talking, they is the Black folks in the United States had a clear sense of how large it was, right? How dominant, right, the Haitian army was, the power of the victory over France. And, you know, they were reading and circulating and telling each other about the Declaration, the Act of Independence. They were telling each other about the Constitution, right? Like they knew, right, about these documents, and they were clear about what Haiti was and what it represented. And I think that right, is the answer to the question of like, why is it so important to them? How does it radicalize them, right? Like for them, Haiti is like the ultimate. When I originally started working on this book, the working title was The Cradle of Hope, because that was a quote from one of the Black activists at the time. And I kind of just had it like a placeholder in my mind to keep reminding myself that's what Haiti was to Black activists in the US in the 19th century. It was a cradle of hope. It was like the literal birthplace, right, of feeling hopeful, right, that there is a potential end to slavery, right, that a day will come when Black people are not only free, but govern themselves and have their own sovereign nation. Imagine what that looks like and feels like, right, to someone who is still laboring in bondage.
Well,
right?
the impossible is what's radical. It's always that thing that you can't really test the forbidden.
Right.
Is what is radical.
Right.
I wanted to just go over what's in the book and the different phases, the different the years. So the book is from 1804 up until 1863, and the book is laid out chronologically. You know, different time periods, like the first 20 years, what really happens right after the 20 years after independence, which people don't really cover, which is one of the reasons why you wrote the book, because people just get to the Haitian Revolution and that's it. Haitian Revolution and then poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. So there's like just 2 centuries of history missing.
Like there are some other things.
A lot of things going on. And I'm so glad Dr. Alexander looks at these 60 years between 1804 right up into the Civil War and how instrumental the discussion on Haiti was and how necessary it was, up until even really its influence on the Civil War itself.
Yes.
What the United States, what they call the slave power in the South and the Northerners were talking about, and a lot of it, the Haitian discussion about where should we recognize Haiti as a nation, and that didn't happen until 1861. Was it 62?
1861 is when the debate happens, and it goes into effect in
1862, and the Civil War is between 1861 and 1864. So the Civil War already started. So, and well, I'm not going to jump to it because I wanted to jump to the Civil War. So it's the first 20 years, 1804 to 1825, and then the next chapter talks about the indemnity. The 1825 indemnity up until 1929. And then it's the decade between 1829 to 1834, where we could talk about what Black folks over here were doing and what was happening in Haiti after the indemnity. So if Haiti was doing okay, great. the indemnity happened. This is when a lot of the fluctuation starts happening now, the indemnity and what it had to do to repay it. You also talked about what happened with the eastern part of the island, which was not the Dominican Republic yet, but became the Dominican Republic in 1844. So all that comes into play and helps us contextualize what is happening in these years. And then you go into the 7-year period where there are petitions, again, different strategies that Black activists are using in addition to the newspapers, going to DC, and now there's petitions now going to DC. And then from 1838 to 1848, it's, I'm glad you included in this chapter the enslaved voices. What were enslaved people saying about Haiti? How did enslaved people talk about Haiti, and how did you find them in the archives? Because we knew what the North was doing. They had newspapers and access and abolitionists and what have you. And then 1848 to 1859, you have Suluk, Faustin Suluk I, who made Haiti an empire. And it was at this point in the 1850s that I realized that Suluk becomes empire, and then that's when the really high rash of anti-Haitianism really went up a peak. Because how dare you, first of all, 1804, you're free, now you're an empire? Oh, no. And it's around that time that you see a lot of very racist newspaper clippings of Suluk in this very racist stereotype, subhuman, minstrel kind of depictions in white American newspapers. So, and then we talk about the immigration movement, because the immigration movement, a lot of times the narrative now is like people are leaving Haiti, but nobody ever knows that people tried to go to Haiti, which was your point in the first place. So I'm glad there's a chapter on that, like what sparked the immigration movement, who were involved in the immigration movement. And then the last chapter is the chapter of the Civil War. And, but I really wanted to, well, first of all, should we pause now and open it up for questions, or is there something else?
Sure.
The first one is good. Okay. All right. So let me start with one thing to just open. If anybody has any questions, raise your hand, and there will be someone with mic. Okay, so someone has a mic?
Yeah, there we are. Uh-oh.
I didn't get to the definition. Black intellectual.
Oh, yeah. We'll weave that. We'll find.
We'll weave that. Okay. And then the women you couldn't find.
So aggravating. Oh my God.
The women you couldn't find.
Hi, good evening. Great talk. So in your research, did you find where there was a concerted effort between all the nations, and I'm not going to say just the United States, France, there's Spain, there's all, to ensure that what happened in Haiti was basically supposed to be like a downfall for us?
Yes.
In the sense that I think Haiti is like the most important country in its power, even to this day. And I think that's why there's constantly a concerted effort to ensure that even people of color would not want to go to Haiti.
Yes.
And I say that because even in the 60s and 70s, when my parents were coming over and everybody else was coming over, we were so maligned, at least in New York, and I don't know if anybody can remember, but we were so maligned by our own people.
Yeah.
It wasn't by white people, it was by Black people who treated us like anything. So I just wonder if in your research you found that concerted effort, whether it's guised in politics and economics, but the whole thing about we cannot let people of color know that you have the ability to change and have an impact.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for the question. And I think in a way you kind of hit the nail on the head in a lot of ways, but in part, you identified kind of ultimately why I changed the title and named the book Fear of a Black Republic. If there's any other Gen Xers out there, you will probably realize that I'm riffing on Public Enemy's Fear of a Black Planet. And I acknowledge that in the epilogue. But, you know, I really kind of struggled with it because what had originally inspired me to write this book was to really highlight the activism among Black folks in the United States and to show their depth of commitment, their depth of passion, the lengths they wanted to go to advocate for Haiti and Haitian sovereignty. But you can't tell that story without also telling what they're up against. Like, why are they having to fight so hard to advocate for Haiti? And so I just kept coming back, right, to the ways in which there is this palpable fear that white folks at the time had, and in my opinion, continue to have, right, about what would it mean if not let Haiti win, but like if we stopped doing everything we could, right, to prevent Haiti from winning. And it's very clear that, you know, obviously my research focused on the United States in the 19th century, but it is very clear from the documents that the United States government is doing absolutely everything it can to ensure that Haiti does not win, while at the same time positioning U.S. businessmen from stripping all of the resources that they can from the island. One of the sources that I ended up using quite a bit for this book, which I did not expect to use because I'm really someone who like looks at political consciousness and resistance movements, but I started looking at all of these economic, you know, and financial records. And there are all of the, from Port-au-Prince, from Cap Haitian, and from OK. There are reports, right, that show the, why am I blanking on what they're called? But the economic representatives, right?
Commercial agents?
Yes, thank you. The commercial agents, right? From each of these places that are reporting, right? All of the ships that are coming in and out from the United States, what they're getting in Haiti and what they're taking out. And it was stunning, right?
The fear of missing out, FOMO.
Right, literally, it's FOMO, right? Like the volume of ships that are coming in and out, but just the volume of things that they're taking and the very little that they're bringing in exchange, right? It is in many ways, right, kind of a replay of what was happening in the transatlantic trade in humans, right? Very little being brought into the African continent, and you're literally like taking, right, the extraction, right, of human and material resources. And in this case, we see a very similar dynamic, right, where very little is coming in, but all of the natural resources. I mean, Haiti is probably, as you all know, you can tell me much better, right, is probably one of the most natural resource rich places, certainly in the Americas, if not in the world, right? And it's clear, right, that the United States understands that, and they're doing everything they can. And at certain points in time, you can actually see the very conscious and intentional deforestation, right, that's taking place. At one point, I'm like, you know, turning from, and I'm looking at this on microfilm, which if anyone has ever done that, is like mad tedious, okay? But so I'm like looking at all of these pages and pages of these documents, and all of a sudden, at a certain point, it flips from all of the things that you would expect. And then it's just for years, logwood, mahogany, logwood, mahogany, logwood. And I'm like, what the hey is mahogany? I mean, logwood. But then I'm realizing like, oh, they are just like steadily deforesting this place and are robbing it of its natural resources. So it's clear, right, in that regard, economically, that they're doing everything they can to rob Haiti of its resources, but they're also politically maneuvering, right, to undermine and destabilize Haiti. And I think it's in, I feel like I want to say in chapters 4 and 5 in particular, I talk about these like secret plots that are taking place in the United States government to try to overthrow the Haitian government and to reimpose not only what they're calling white rule, right, like reasonable white rule, but they're also trying to reimpose slavery. That's the plan, right? Because from their perspective, well, it's south of the Mason-Dixon line, right? So,
or should be.
Yeah, it's, therefore is open to slavery, right? So that's the plan. And over the course of the 1840s and 50s, they're very serious about it. They send mercenaries down there to try to overthrow the government. Once the Dominican Republic, right, declares its independence, then they try to foment conflict, right, between Haiti and the Dominican Republic. They plot to use the Dominican Republic as a launch pad, right, to try to reimpose, what they're, like I said, what they're calling white rule, but it's really United States rule, right, and to try to reimpose slavery. So, yeah, I mean, it is literally all right there, like in the documents. In ways, honestly, I didn't expect it was going to be like so. Like I thought I knew it was going to be there, but I thought I was going to have to hunt and peck for it.
Yeah.
And it's like literally, it's just all laid out. Like, here's the plan. This is what we're finna do. Right?
Yeah. They're very, very open with, especially. I keep saying the slave power, which is what a quote from your book. Very open. We're white. This is what we're going to do. This is divine. This is the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Nothing is hidden from that. It's totally clear, crystal clear. Yeah. And what you just said had me thinking about this whole period that you write about, that you cover 1804 to 1860s. It almost feels like it's a setup for the 1915 occupation, the invasion. Like that was there, like now we could come in and do that. Yeah. So this whole period was like a gearing up to that. Yeah. And the occupation was like last coup de grace. Now we got now we got them.
No, literally. And I see there's a question, so I'll just say this very quickly, but it's not the very last chapter because there's an epilogue, but the last chapter that you mentioned, right, that's on the U.S. recognition, right, the vote that takes place in Congress to extend diplomatic recognition to Haiti. When I first started writing this book, that was going to be like 2 pages in a different chapter, like I had no intention of writing an entire chapter about that because the way that story is always told in U.S. history is Charles Sumner, who's a senator in the United States and who's an abolitionist, presents the bill in Congress. It's, they vote on it and yay, Haiti is recognized, right?
There's a back and forth.
Honestly, in the back of my mind, I was always like, so then how do we get from that to the occupation? Like, how does, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, I was struggling to connect the dots prior to it. Then I look at the debate on the floor of Congress. And again, like literally all of this stuff is online. Like you can go right in and you can read for yourself the debates that take place on the floor of Congress. It was some of the ugliest, most racist stuff I have ever read in my life. And it is word for word the conversations that are taking place in the United States Congress, which, I mean, I guess given the conversations that are having in the United States Congress now, we should not be surprised, right? Yeah. What they're saying in the 19th century. But what those documents revealed is that their decision to extend formal diplomatic recognition actually had absolutely nothing to do with the Civil War. You know what I mean? In the sense that it had nothing to do with like, oh, the South has seceded and now the abolitionists are triumphing. No. What it's about is Northern businessmen are finally saying,
Enough is enough.
Enough is enough. Open this freaking country to us so
Exactly.
that we can expand economic imperialism. Stop playing, right?
Exactly.
Like slavery, we can't profit off of slavery anymore. Because now the Confederacy is another country, right? Now the southern states are another country. So we can't exploit that anymore, right? So stop playing, open up Haiti, right? So it becomes really clear that the only reason they extend diplomatic recognition is to open Haiti up. There's a line in there where one of the advisors says, if we extend formal diplomatic recognition, it will allow the United States to hold Haiti in the hollow of our hand.
Exactly. And Frederick Douglass said the same thing.
Yes.
That was one of his concerns as well, because if I remember correctly, the reaction from the recognition was like, I don't know if this is going to be a great thing for Haiti, the recognition. Because they saw that.
Right.
They saw that coming.
No, they were crystal clear about that.
Yeah.
And on the floor of Congress, they say, well, the reason this is a good idea is because Haiti is one natural vast cotton field. Right?
And the South love that.
People who already know how to do that work. That's literally what they're saying. So then I was like, oh, now I get it. I get now how we get from formal recognition to the occupation,
but
right?
also the immigration.
That's not actually a victory, right? It's not a victory for the abolitionist movement. It's not a victory for Haiti, right? It is a very poorly disguised, right? Attempt to basically open Haiti up to U.S. economic imperialism.
I could say more, but please.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. As a fellow, as you described, American Negro activist.
That's a joke, by the way. I don't mean to offend anyone, but
I'm curious. Activists like David Walker or Sojourner Truth, what was their role vis-a-vis Haiti, especially when the eastern part became the Dominican Republic?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a ton of like individual Black activists who play really important roles, some of whom, are kind of name famous, right? Like people who are familiar to us as activists, others who were very famous in their time, but kind of flew under the, have since flown under the radar. David Walker is, according, depending on who you ask, some historians would say died, some historians would say murdered, right? But David Walker dies in 1829. So he doesn't live long, right, in terms of seeing what happens to Haiti after the indemnity, right? He sees the first few years and that's about it. But if you look at his speeches, and of course, if you look at his most famous compilation, right, of speeches, which was an appeal to the colored citizens of the world, which again, the title right there should let you know Black people in the US were thinking about what's happening else in the world, right? Because if they weren't, then why are you calling it to the colored people of the world? But he writes, right, very passionately about Haiti in the appeal and about the Haitian Revolution, right, as a symbol and a powerful example, right, that Black people elsewhere in the African diaspora should embrace. He writes about Haiti's right to sovereignty and his disgust with the United States government for not recognizing Haiti. Again, he dies in 1829, but he does play an important role in inspiring other Black activists to speak out on this issue. So one of his closest friends was a woman named Mariah Stewart, who again she lived much longer, but she got driven out of the abolitionist movement, right, by people who did not want women to be publicly speaking on political topics. But during the time that she was writing and speaking, she also wrote very strongly, right, about Haiti's right to sovereignty, about the model that Haiti presented, and about the importance, right, of defending and protecting Haiti's right to sovereignty. Frederick Douglass, I have this very weird love-hate relationship with Frederick Douglass. Yeah, and I would imagine and especially in this room, I am not alone. Frederick Douglass was such a really complicated character. In so many ways, but particularly on the issue of Haiti and Haitian sovereignty. During the vast majority of the early part of his career, he was a very passionate and outspoken supporter of Haiti and of Haiti's right to sovereignty, and was deeply critical of the United States government for not recognizing Haiti. And, relative to what you said at the beginning, very early in his career, he was really kind of ride or die with Haiti. Like, even when, for example, like Luke was doing some things that were a little questionable, right?
He
went all the way. Like, he was like, Luke is my boy. Like, he was going to ride that one till the wheels came off. He defended Haiti and its leaders right down the line. And kind of in that like really passionate way that kind of only Frederick Douglass could. But obviously, right, he was also a person who had profound personal aspirations. And by the time that the movement to have Haiti recognized officially by the United States comes into being, he begins to imagine himself as the U.S. ambassador to Haiti. And he kind of writes and talks about that privately in his own letters and, in his personal correspondence. And I think he feels very strongly about Haiti. And as I talk about in chapter 7, he plans to potentially immigrate to Haiti himself. Like, that's how strongly he feels about it. But he eventually decides to remain in the United States, and that's when he begins to imagine himself as the ambassador to Haiti. And as I imagine most of you know, during his time as ambassador, my read of it is he gets hoodwinked and bamboozled, right, by the United States government. He allows himself to be manipulated into representing the interests of the United States government over the interests of, the global Black liberation struggle. And he obviously fails Haiti in some really profound ways. In the epilogue, I do talk about, right, how when he speaks at the Chicago World's Fair in 1893, I think he eventually leaves the position, right, because I think he finally realizes, like, I've gone too far with this, right? And he does kind of try to redeem himself, in terms of, we probably all have our feelings about whether or not he successfully redeems himself, right? Because he did a terrible wrong. But he tries, right, to redeem himself, acknowledging, right, that the United States government was continuing to do wrong by Haiti. And I think that's a position that he held until the end of his life. But his role as ambassador was fairly horrific, right? And maybe tells us something, right, about what happens when people start out as fighting for the people and become instead more interested in feeding their own egos, right, than in serving the people. Hi.
Good evening, everyone. I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
You mentioned that U.S. does not want Haiti to win. I want to know, why is that? Also, if Haiti is a free and independent country, why do we need a win from the U.S.? What would it take for Haiti to win? And actually, this is a 3rd question, sorry. Do the Haitian Republic know about this chokehold that we have against us? I know you see everything that's taking place on the news and the violence and the destruction, and it's not pleasing to the eye. I know you don't probably have an answer for it, but It's just why. Like, what would it take for us to understand that we are independent, the true meaning behind it, and the action that we need to actually withhold like the Haitian people, because I feel like they don't know.
Yeah.
Because we know, because everyone knows, okay, 1804, we have all these parties, celebration, and what have you. But I don't think the Republic knows that.
Right.
So,
no, those are great questions. In terms of the first piece, I mean, the United States, I think, like most white Western nations, did not and do not want to see Haiti win because, in their opinion, right, in their estimation, Haiti was and is a country that was founded by people of African descent who had the courage, and in this sense, they're thinking about it in the negative connotation of audacity, right? They had the audacity to refuse to submit to their enslavement, right? And they had the audacity to imagine themselves as full and equal human beings who had the right to govern themselves and to be sovereign. And in a way that is one of the kind of two things that I'm trying to trace in the book, right? In terms of how white Americans, right? In terms of mainstream, right? Obviously, there's a massive abolitionist community that has a different view of it. And I talk about that in the middle of the book. But mainstream white Americans, during the 19th century, just, we were talking about Trujillo before we started talking. And I mean, for them, this really is unthinkable. In their minds, in the back of their minds, they know how fragile the institution of slavery is, right? Because they know they don't want it for themselves. They know they don't want to be enslaved, right? Which is why they fought their revolution. We don't want to be slaves to the British crown, right? That's the language they used, right? We are slaves to the British crown and we don't want to be slaves. Okay, well, it turns out we don't want to be slaves either, right? And they knew that. And so they knew how tenuous, right, slavery was as an institution. And they knew how fragile their position was. And they were profoundly fearful about a potential domino effect, right? If Haiti falls, where's next, right? Is it going to be Jamaica? Is it going to be Guadeloupe? Is it going to be Martinique? Is it going to be Curacao, right? Is it going to be the United States, right? Like, where is slavery going to fall next and where will it stop? And when you look actually at the documents of U.S. political leaders at the time and the letters they're writing to each other, they're calling the rebellion in what they're calling, of course, Saint-Domingue, right, or Saint Domingo. They're describing it as a contagion that has to be stopped, right? So they're imagining it. It's this like cancerous, right, disease that has to be stopped. Otherwise, we're going to have Black liberation, right? And that is not a feeling that went away, right? Over the course of the 19th century. It's not a feeling that went away over the course of the 20th century. In my opinion, it's not a feeling that has gone away today, right? There is still a feeling of what are the consequences in the mind, right, of political leaders in the white Western world. What does it mean if Haiti wins? What does that say about white supremacy? Right? What does that say about the future of the global political arena? Right? Like, what is that? What are the consequences of that? They just cannot allow that to happen. Now, I think the second part of your question is really crucial, right? Because certainly Haiti does not need the United States in order to win, right? I hope that's clear. I hope it's clear that I feel that way. But what, in my opinion, does need to happen is the white Western world, including the United States, needs to stop hating on Haiti, right? Like, I think that the successful Haitian revolution has made it clear that the Haitians don't need anybody in order to win, right? And to become sovereign. but they have to, it's very difficult for a nation to thrive when the rest of the powers in the world are conspiring against it. Right? Right.
I've been following politics since I was born. My father's been in politics, and I've been watching. I've been doing construction since 1992 until this present day.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, president after president is gotten worse and worse.
Yes.
And now
Right.
this partner.
Right.
So I'm like, even if the political power has to get back into the people.
Right.
And like, if I can't trust you, I can't trust anyone.
Right. Which again, I think leads to my point about the role. And I mean, in this case, I'm picking on the United States. We can pick on a lot of, you know what I mean? The white Western world, but you know, I enjoy picking on the United States. Yeah. You know, but I mean, I'm not a 20th century historian. I'm a 19th century historian. But when we look at the 20th century, how many of the Haitian leaders have actually been chosen by the Haitian people, right?
Great
In a
question.
truly democratic process.
What happened to the one that was?
And what happened to the one that was? Right? What happened to the one who was? So, you know what I mean? So that's what I mean when I say Haiti does not need the United States, right, in order to win. But it would certainly be helpful if the United States would stop doing everything they could to try to make Haiti lose. You know what I mean?
So we have another question.
Hi. My name is Angela, and I'm speaking for myself only. So this is my second time listening to you. The first time was from online with the New York Public Library. It was only 1 hour. Yeah. And then I wanted to say, I'm speaking for me only. So I wanted to say, I find it very intellectually courageous from you to write a book on Haiti. The reason why I'm saying this, I'm not shooting on anybody. I know there are Haitian intellectuals who have the same caliber that you have.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time when I see them in the American media, they just shove Haiti. They don't even talk about it. Yeah. And when they talk about Haiti, they talk about the superficial things. And then they say what American people want to hear. And from my part, I want to say thank you for that. And it's very brave from me. Yeah. My question following that is, I know that we, the Haitian people, we welcome the book because you're talking for us. So my question for you is, how did like the American people receive the book? And then did that affect you professionally in career-wise? Because I think it's very, talking about Haiti doesn't give you any clout.
No.
And then like, I don't know, Professor Placid said earlier, there's a blackout in the media. Yeah. Like I was very angry for the past month when the media was promoting Jimmy Cherizier like a revolutionary leader, yeah. Because and all the mainstream media, that's what they were doing. And like you said, they start chanting that guy like this. And then every international media was doing the same thing. And then I even hear people like highly have a lot of degrees talking like that too. So my point for you, like, did that affect you negatively? I know from the Haitian people, it's love, but what about the American people?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Thank you. And I really want to say thank you for what you said too. As I said at the beginning, you know, in a way for me, I wrote, like in my mind, this book is kind of a love letter to Haiti, right? And to the Haitian people.
And it reads like that. It really does.
And so the fact that you receive it that way really means a lot to me. As I said at the beginning, I had a lot of anxiety about writing this book because I didn't feel really like I should be the one to write this book. And I really wanted to make sure that I got it right. And I'm sure there are places where I got it wrong, right? And I'm sure there are times where I still get it wrong, right? But it comes from a place of love. and I wrote it and intended it as a love letter. So it feels good to know that it has been received in that way. I also want to say, especially because you're with us here, I wanted to say that, one of the very first things that I did when I was like, okay, maybe I'm going to like work up my courage and try to write on this topic is I started going to the Haitian Studies Association conferences and kept going back and put my work out there. Okay, let me get some feedback on this. That was terrible. Okay, let me try it again. So, really tried to be open to coming from a place of realizing that I had a story that I wanted to tell and that I wanted to inspire other Black people in the United States to care about Haiti and to care about the Haitian people, but to recognize that I was not, that I had to come with a level of humility, right? And recognize I'm not an expert in this, right? This is not my story per se. And so I had to approach it in that way. In terms of how it's been received, I mean, the truth is there are a lot of people who just don't appreciate anything I have to say. You know what I mean? And it is largely because like I come from a Black studies perspective. Like I strive to have a situation in which everything I teach, everything I write, everything I read, is about and is intended towards the liberation of African people worldwide, right? So, I mean, from their perspective, this is just another thing that I did that they hate. You know what I mean? But I think the goal is we have to keep telling the truth. Like, we just have to keep telling the truth. I do have to say that, like, it has meant a lot to me that, now that the book has been out for a little bit, when I travel around, I feel appreciation from the Haitian communities that I visit. And that means a lot to me for the reasons that I said before. Honestly, the rest of it, I just try to block out as noise. You know what I mean? Like as things that are trying to distract us from the goal. You know what I mean? Yeah. 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 No, that's right. I'm laughing because I had to fight tooth and nail for this title. Like, the press did absolutely everything to try to get me to change this title.
Well, that's part of the radicalism. Fear of a Black Republican. That's just telling, Republic.
Yeah.
Republican.
Yeah. We're scared of them too. Yeah. No, but it was actually really funny because they would keep sending me an email like, okay, everything else is fine, but do you want to consider this? I'm like, no, what? We're just not sure it's going to land. Do people get it? Does it resonate? You know what I mean? Right. Right. That's really what it was. And I finally just wrote back and said, this is the title. I'm not changing it. So either we're publishing it with this title or I'm taking the book somewhere else. But this is the title. And then they're like, okay, fine.
I will. And thanks for your courage, for your courage in standing up and for the courageous conversation, courageous words, courageous actions, words, and deeds. I just want to remind everybody that I think we'll have to vacate before we get evicted by 8:30, 8:35 or so. I'm going to try to stretch it to a quarter to, but by 8:30 we need to wrap up. So ask the questions, make your comments, make it quick so that we can, we can feel good tonight when we go to bed.
I'll try to keep my answers brief so we can take as many questions.
Thank you for this opportunity. Good evening, everyone. And it's a great dialogue. And I think this is a discourse that can last for a day. Many questions came up, but I'd like to contend with two. The first one has to do with, you mentioned that the U.S. tried to maintain an embargo on Haiti in the early 1800s, but it couldn't hold.
Right.
Meanwhile, Haiti remained a very important trade partner.
Yes.
In what way? That's the first question. And the second question has to do with the fact is, we live in a world, or the way the Western world started,
Yeah.
it seems to be one void of political morality.
Yeah.
It's like anything goes. Look, I mean, starting with slavery, and we Haitians, we had to fight it. And when we fought and won, the big issue became one of fear. That was then. And it seems that that fear remains today. So, as Black folks, are we to live with this fear forever? Or what are we to do to mitigate this fear? Is it something, it sounds like more like something we have to do as a way to address the topic. Step into their shoes to see how we can bring about a solution. So,
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, just to address your first question first. Between 1806 and 1810, the United States tried to impose an economic embargo against Haiti, right? It was part of this kind of this collective effort, right, from the white Western nations to kind of say Haiti doesn't exist, right? So we're not going to recognize you diplomatically, and we're not going to engage in trade. But yeah, the problem is like that kind of broke the United States, right? The truth is Haiti was fine, right, without it, but it created a massive economic problem for the United States because Haiti is such a resource-rich place, right? And so, yes, by this time, the United States had become entirely dependent on Haiti for sugar, for coffee, right? Like, I mean, this is the time in the world where like people in the United States and Europe are like, you know, strung out, right, on sugar and caffeine, right? The things that are still keep us going today, right? And so, right, they're still heavily dependent on trade with Haiti in order to access the volume of sugar and coffee that they want to be able to consume. And they're also in a situation, as I mentioned before, where over time they start becoming really addicted to deforesting Haiti, right? So Haiti is kind of the number one supplier of all of the wood and timber. So if you think about kind of the expansion of the United States that's happening alongside, right, the expansion of their economic interests, the United States, ironically, right, as the result of the successful Haitian Revolution, gets the Louisiana Purchase, right? France needs to recap its financial losses, right? Sells the Louisiana territory to the United States. Just as a result of that, the United States doubles in size, right? So now there is a massive expansion into the West, and they want to build stuff, and they want wood to do it. And ironically, it's back to Haiti they go, right, to get the wood that they need. The other thing, of course, is that this is also a time when, particularly the northern United States, alongside England, becomes caught up in the Industrial Revolution, right? And so they're manufactured finished goods, and they're bringing them back to Haiti to be sold, right? So they're kind of profiting, right, in significant ways on both ends of that relationship. Your second question is honestly like kind of the deep existential question that often keeps me up at night. You may have heard in the introduction that the project I'm working on now is about the long history of surveillance and policing of Black communities. And doing this type of research does cause one, right, to say, like, is this ever going to stop? Are we ever going to see a situation where Black people are just allowed to live, in peace and freedom and self-governance? Like, is there ever going to be a world that allows for that? I think often of a speech that I quoted in the first book that I wrote, and I actually use the speech in class and I write about it a lot because it kind of haunts me. But it started as an editorial that was written by an activist named John Russwurm, who was the editor of the first Black newspaper in the United States, published out of New York City, called Freedom's Journal. And the reason why Freedom's Journal comes to an end is that he decides in 1829 that he's going to migrate to Liberia. His original intention had actually been to migrate to Haiti. But then the indemnity happens and he sees the economic fallout of that and decides instead that he's going to go to Liberia. But he writes an editorial where he's kind of describing why the paper is coming to an end. He's announcing the fact that he's leaving the United States and that he's migrating to West Africa. And I'm about to paraphrase him very badly now. But he says something along the lines of, at the end, that he's leaving the United States because in his mind, at the end of 1,000 years, despite all that we have proven ourselves to be as a race, we are going to be precisely in the same situation that we are now. And he goes on to say, prejudices are not of our making and they are not in our power to remove. And in kind of my lowest moments, right? Like, in 2020, when we all watched a police officer choke out, George Floyd, as he's gasping and begging for his life, as I see all of the things that we all know, in those like very low moments, I go to that place. Like I go to a John Russwurm place, and feel like at the end of 1,000 years, we're going to be precisely in the same situation, right? Because this is not of our making. But the truth is, the vast majority of days, I choose to stay in a place of hope, and I'm reminded that despite everything that has happened to us as a race of people, right, all across the African diaspora, we keep fighting. We keep showing up. We keep, in Afrofuturism, we keep imagining victory. We keep believing in the possibility of that.
All right. So this could be the last.
Say it hasn't worked so far.
So this could be the last question for the evening before we wrap up. And of course, Dr. Sirda.
Congratulations. It's amazing. I haven't read the book, but I will. So my question is, do you have plans to incorporate all of this great research that you've done to kind of create a curriculum to submit to the school districts in the United States and around the world? Because there is no Haitian history, there is no Haitian Revolution curriculum. Here in New York, there isn't. We learn about the Holocaust, we learn about everything else, but there's nothing concrete to say, well, this happened. And we know we have an oral history, so it's great to have it written down and to have it concisely there, presenting it to the Board of Education and said, listen, I need this to be included in your civics education curriculum from maybe 8th grade on to 12th grade. And that is primary sources, extremely, like, I don't know how to do it, but that would be a great thing, because we can say, well, there's no hope, but then we can't really, they won't be able to negate what's there. It's like, yeah, okay, this happened, that happened. Yeah. And the kids will know. I mean, they can even start earlier, from second grade to 12th grade.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, it's there. I know Brown did something, but it's at the university level. So that's something to.
I'm really glad that you reminded me of that. I would be 100% open to doing that. You reminded me, I have like actually sort of just a traumatic flashback right now of my nephew who's now in college. When he was like in middle school, he came home for like literally an entire academic year, every day, talking about how horrible the Holocaust was and how terrible German people are. And it was like, it haunted him literally. And like for years after that, he was like, I don't think I can even like a German person. Like German people are terrible. I mean, he just became obsessed, and rightly so, right? Because the Holocaust, the Jewish Holocaust was a horrific, right? Human event in human history. But I kept asking him every day when he would come home and talk about the Holocaust, I'd be like, have you learned about slavery yet? Like, what are you all talking about slavery? Oh, no, we're not talking about that.
Haitian Revolution.
So,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
it's the two
It's a reminder of the fact that the United States feels really comfortable telling terrible stories about things that have happened in other places. Right? They're not so willing to engage topics that acknowledge their own complicity.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. And also
it's a reminder that it's important that
it also reminds the kids of their own strength. I mean, we're learning about all of the, like these people fought to be free. So, like that enhances their self-esteem. It boosts their sense of being, so that's something.
I will say this. I worked with the New York Public Library on a curriculum about Black New Yorkers in the 19th century. And I snuck in a few sources about how they felt about Haiti. So I did try to get that in there, but I appreciate that because that is definitely something.
And I just want to say that HSI has an educational resource guide that we're doing. So this would be a perfect opportunity to include some of your material for this educational resource guide that we're revising.
Right. And in addition to that, the Haitian Studies Institute is hosting a summer institute for K-12 teachers in the New York City public school children who stand in front of Haitian students all the time. And one of the books that they will be receiving is the book of Dr. Leslie Alexander, not just unguided, but facilitated conversation that we will host with them. And we might invite you to speak with them as well.
Be happy.
Among other things. And yes, I appreciate the way you answered that question, but I'm going to add, the United States is not comfortable to talk about what it did to the enslaved African who came on this land. Needless to say, they would allow the historical textbooks to include what's happening around the hemisphere. What people were doing around the hemisphere, and it's Dr. Alexander
else's fault.
Exactly. Dr. Alexander said it's purposeful. It's intentional. It's not accident. It's by design, And when I teach, because when I teach literature mostly, or I teach education, I always make sure that I do talk about the big six. I said it wasn't just the Netherlands, Spain, France, Britain. What's the other one again? Portugal. The United States was also a major slave holding nations. Exactly. And when, in 1776, when they declare that all men were created equal, they were talking about white men. For 100 more years, they kept our ancestors enslaved. And sometimes it's embarrassing that you're seeing college students who are not aware of that. Right. Who are totally, we're not exposed to the history of, to the enslavement, to the abuse that the United States have.
American history that was being part of the curriculum. Only 3 sentences. There was an uprising in Haiti, and the white people who were enslaved in this country were afraid it might happen here. That was it, exactly.
Which brings me to, I want you to elaborate a little bit on this, and it's in your book, and I want people to know. And I want you to help us understand whether that has a connection as well to the way the United States decided to contain, obscure the Haitian Revolution and beyond. It is said that one of the biggest revolt in the United States is the 1811 revolt, the German Coast Revolt, spearheaded by two Haitians who came during the turmoil, or because the Louisiana territory was really a French territory, Delon and Zenon. And that happened in 1811, 7 years after the Haitian Revolution. Do you think that was one of the moments the United States said, you see those Haitians, we got to do everything in our means to make sure that their ideas of freedom doesn't get anywhere else?
Yes, no, absolutely. And it goes back to the point that I was making about, how fragile the institution of slavery actually was, right? And the terror among white enslavers about the consequences, right? About a potential domino effect, right? That all of the slaveholding nations would eventually fall to successful revolts. And here's what you have to remember is that the German Coast Revolt happens less than a decade after the Louisiana Territory had become U.S. territory, right? So they have just acquired the Louisiana Territory, and now there is the largest, at least numerically, like the largest uprising of enslaved people that ever happened in the United States history. Right? The German Coast Revolt absolutely terrifies them. But it's important to keep in mind that nearly every major slave uprising that happens in the United States following the outbreak of the Haitian Revolution is inspired by the Haitian Revolution, right? So we have the Pain-Coupé conspiracy, we have Gabriel's rebellion, we have Denmark-Vesey's conspiracy, again, the German Coast Rebellion. And then there's evidence to suggest that the Southampton County Rebellion, what we know as Nat Turner's Rebellion, was also inspired in part by the Haitian Revolution. Although he does not mention it in the confessions, there's other documents surrounding it that suggest that it had been inspired by the Haitian Revolution. And it is no small thing to note that that rebellion begins almost exactly 40 years to the day after 𝗥𝗦𝗣. So so it's the German Coast Rebellion, but it's actually the German Coast Rebellion in combination with all of these other rebellions that take place that they know because of the court testimony had all been inspired by Haiti.
And someone asked me whether the book can be translated into Haitian Creole so that we can have it in Haitian classrooms in Haiti.
I mean, if anyone is willing to help me with that, I'm 100% down. Like I said, I'm just a regular U.S. Negro, so I don't know how to do that. But anyone who wants to work with me to do that, I would love for that. Okay, all right, I would love that. I would love that.
And I have to.
Espace Creole, that is represented here by a few people, have been key partners in helping us to achieve such great conversations. And I want to acknowledge Mines, who's in the room, a longtime friend, partner, and who always stands by the Institute and by me and other people in the community so that the struggle continues.
Dr. Sorrell, you could just stand right there and do the closing. I just wanted to wrap it up and say a big round of applause for Dr. Leslie Alexander. Thank you for joining us. And
for being my conversation partner. I know you put a lot of time and energy into preparing for this, and I so appreciate you. You were a wonderful conversation partner. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you more. And I just want
let's hear it in particular for Jaira Placide Maïf.
And I just want to thank you. I just want to leave with the words of your mentor, James Turner, who said, there's always victory in the struggle.
That's right.
Yes.
So thank you.
Hi, Bobo. And I know everyone's time is precious, but President Dieudonné and I are thrilled that we were able to coordinate, create the space for this wonderful conversation with Dr. Alexander. oh, there's a rifle business being taking place there, right? But we're going to try to get out by 8:30, and we want to thank you all. And I think also I have to acknowledge the hard work of my staff, Pierre Gedeon, Kirill Kaminen, Robert Carrillo, Jaira Placide, Obden Modesio, our archivist. If you have papers, see Obden's. If you have goods, see Obden's. We're building one of the biggest and largest archives for the Haitian US diasporic experience. You are the people who have it, but it's going to be here. And Obden, we've already received some phenomenal donations, and we encourage if you have your parents, grandparents, old passports, anything that you think would be valuable in telling our immigrant experience or history here, please, because we've been coming here for a long time. Pierre Toussaint arrived in 1789, I think. 1787. So if you have things, share with us. And with that, just a big thank you to Dr. Alexander. Thank you to Ninette. Thank you. And I'll turn it over. Oh, Bongo, yes, Bongo Ninette, thank you so much for always responding. Someone did this to you, lah.
All right, so we have the raffle ready. If anyone wants to buy a last minute ticket, it's $5, and it's for the domino set, including the card. So if anybody's interested, you could come up and buy a last minute ticket. It's going towards our scholarship fund.
I'm gonna buy a ticket.
Wait, one ticket.
I'm getting one.
Give her one and I'll pay for it.
No, I'm getting
No. I got no. Oh, you want to donate? Okay. Yeah, it's on my phone. It's on my laptop.
for you.
So you need $5. I'll get it. Okay. 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 Oh, we'll do it the next event. Thank you. Two.
Thank you.
Oh yeah.
Thank
you. Yeah, definitely.
I gave her mine. Yeah.
You get two. Thank you, Khadija.
But then it's like, yeah, you could do it. Like, it's on YouTube. That work.
What is there?
No, we don't need to do it.
Anybody else?
All right. Who wants to be the lucky picker?
Thank you.
Okay, we're about to pick the winner.